Thanks, Kitty. This is a privilege to be able to do this. We've had a lot of investment in archaeology at the Divinity School, and it's going to be increasing, I think, in coming years, because now the Jewish Studies program in the college has started to develop an interest in it as well. And we're thinking that this may bring more undergraduate students into the field, which has not been happening very much. Universities around the country that do engage in archaeology have normally dozens of undergrads. And this is a good experience for students in the Divinity School and the graduate program. You can imagine it can be just as rich for those who are earlier on in their training as well. We have been a member of the consortium sponsoring the dig at Megiddo, which digs only every even-numbered year. So it dug a year ago, of course, and it's coming up now this next summer. That's a major dig that's been going on really on and off for over 100 years. It's kind of a gemstone of archaeological discoveries. We'll be able to send some students there next year as well. But this, what has been especially interesting with Jezreel, is that this is not, although it has been dug previously, it's been dormant for a good number of years, and so they just now have reopened the site, and our students were involved in that process. To open a site is very different than continuing a dig that's been going on for some time. As you can imagine, you start at the grass level and go down, and start instead of continuing someplace where someone's already dug down several meters. Over 50 divinity and graduate students in the last 15 years, considering that most of them, it's been every other year up until now. We've sent a lot of students out and around. It's both PhD graduates who are out teaching now and themselves have gotten involved in the DIG program. Two of them, especially prominently, have been participating in the dig with Jezreel and having supervisory roles. Julie Bidmead and Deborah Appler got their PhDs here some 10 years ago, maybe, not quite. What this does is a number of things. Our purposes we've got lined up for this program. We want people to have hands-on experience with archaeology. You all will know about it from the Discovery Channel and History Channel, if nothing else. To be able to get out there in the dirt and have to do it at 5 o'clock in the morning is not an everyday occurrence for most people, and it's an exciting process to begin to dig further and further back into history. We want people also to get to know the country of Israel. They're not only there in their little 5x5 square where they're digging. They do have a chance to travel. On the weekends especially, we set up trips that go to other archaeological sites or other cultural places in the country, and give them a chance then to have that connection. In addition, specifically because of the program in the Divinity School and in the Graduate Department of Religion, we do want people to develop some more knowledge about the setting in which the Bible was placed. And that's something that can best be done when you're on site rather than through books. That's certainly been my experience as well. And finally, also, these are international teams that dig there. And so they have a chance then to, our students, everyone has a chance to mingle with people coming from other countries who are there for the same purposes. Itself is a rich experience. There are two directors for the dig at Jezreel. One is Norma Franklin, who for years has been associated with the dig at Megiddo and has helped many of our students there. The other is Jenny Abeling. Norma is at the University of Haifa. Jenny Abeling is at the University of Evansville, and Jenny happens to be here. And I want to give Jenny a chance to say hello and a couple minutes here if you would like. Jenny, just come on up here to the mic.
Hi, thanks very much for having me here this morning. I'm really thrilled to be able to be here and see some of the students who participated this past summer. It's great to see them again, and Professor Knight and others. So I'm chair of the Department of Archaeology and Art History at the University of Evansville in Indiana. It's about a 2.5-hour drive north, so it's not that as far away as it seems. So I'm very happy to have been able to come down for this morning. Norma and I are thrilled to have this connection with Vanderbilt. As you can see, the sponsoring institutions of this program are University of Evansville, Haifa, Vanderbilt, and Villanova University. So Vanderbilt and Villanova are our consortium members. And so we were really grateful this year to have the support of the Divinity School in sending graduate students to participate in 2 or 4 weeks with us in 2013. And we anticipate, of course, bringing more next summer and in the summers to come. We're hoping to be in the field for at least another 4 or 5 years. We'll be digging every summer for probably 4 weeks in May, June. We are going early in the season. It's cooler. And so we were the first dig out this summer, which was great. So it actually gave us a lot of opportunities to do things we wouldn't have normally been able to do. So we also have a very busy field school program. My students are undergraduate archaeology majors, so they form sort of the core of this program. And so we offer lectures and field trips and other kinds of educational opportunities for them. They had to keep field notebooks and records and take a test and all sorts of things. So did Susanna, because she got graduate credit to participate this summer. So she did the same thing. So it's a very well-rounded, very full, intense experience, as I'm sure they will tell you in their own words. But we're really excited to be back at Jezreel. It was excavated for 6 seasons from 1990 to the mid-90s by Tel Aviv University and the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem. Since then, the site has been more or less ignored. There's literally barbed wire around the site. You can't actually go on Tel Jezreel as a visitor, as a tourist. So one of the goals that we have in the next few years is to change that. So in addition to excavating different parts of the site that have never been investigated before off of the Tel itself, we're also hoping to develop, work with the local government to develop the site for tourism and open it up. People do come to the site and go sort of near it. They go to the spring near where we were digging and have picnics and throw their trash around on the ground. But they don't really kind of get the experience of visiting an important biblical site. There's not really explanatory materials or anything there. So we're hoping to change that in the future and bring more attention to this site. So I'm really glad that we will be able to do that this morning through the mouths of the students who participated. So I don't want to give more away, but I would be really happy to talk to anyone after their presentations if you have questions about the program, what we're doing, what our plans are for the future. We do have some preliminary reports that are online. We have a website. We're on Facebook, so we're trying to get the word out, that way, as well as putting some preliminary reports in print already. So thanks very much, and I will hopefully speak to some of you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm not going to spend any more time here. This is actually a session in which we can let the 4 diggers who were involved this summer tell you about it. The people here, the ones who were digging, are Rhonda Siggers, Susanna Morris, Caitlin Asher, and Yolanda Norton. There are 2 others, Reed Von Gin and Elizabeth Siegelman, who graduated this last May, so they are out of the vicinity. Otherwise, they'd be here too. But I'm just going to let you guys take over, and we will, at the end, have a chance for some questions. There are also, on the table here, there are some artifacts if you want to see something and touch something that's 3,000, 4,000 years old. It's right there. They're not from Jezreel, they're from another dig that I'd done, but we'll have time for questions as well. Let's see, it's Rhonda first.
Good morning. Okay, so really quickly, I just want to explain to you the context in which I came to the dig. This is my 2nd year at Vanderbilt Divinity School, and during my Hebrew Bible class, Dr. Franklin came and shared with us about the opportunity to participate in this dig. A lot of my friends were not interested in participating, especially when they heard of the work that this particular dig would entail. I was excited. I thought about this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kind of be in my mind where Jesus walked, okay? So, and I'm going to begin with the environment of Jezreel. The central Jezreel Valley extends roughly 380 kilometers and is bounded on the north by the Nazareth Mountains and Mount Tabor, on the east and south by Mount Gilboa and the mountains of Samaria, and on the west by Mount Carmel, all of which we hear of in the Bible. The name Jezreel means God will sow. Today, the Jezreel Valley is Israel's breadbasket, sprouting wheat, cotton, sunflowers, and even fish ponds. The Jezreel Valley and the mountains surrounding it served as a bridge linking Africa, Asia, and Europe. Ancient caravans bringing merchandise came through, as attested by the famed ruins of some 25 cities at Tel Megiddo, Tel Jezreel, and other antiquated sites. This is a picture that I shot from the area where we were digging early in the morning, and I thought that was a perfect, I felt like it captured like the rays, in my mind, the rays of God. The book of Kings weaves a dramatic story around Jezreel, involving Ahab, Jezebel, and Naboth, Jehu, Joram, and Uzziah. Jezreel is mentioned throughout the books of Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and the books of Hosea. So again, you could feel, and you felt like you were in this walking through history. Now, this is actually a shot from the Jezreel Valley from above. So this is at the highest point of where we were digging from. In the spring of 2012, a team of archaeologists spent 3 weeks surveying by foot this particular area. In addition, they used technology known as LiDAR, and for those of you not familiar with that, it's a remote sensing technology that allows them to, from the sky, identify what they thought were possible ruins. Our Jezreel team focused on 3 excavation areas. On the north ridge of the Tel Jezreel, there was Area M. At the foot of the natural hill of Jezreel, Area K, which was opened up after I had left. And on the eastern part of the uncultivated land, the Masha, directly south of and above the spring of Ain Israel, Area S, which is where I dug. One of the main goals of the 2013 season was to test the LiDAR results in order to verify the occupation of the terrace above Ain Jezreel in Area S. This is another shot of the Jezreel Valley looking down towards the spring from where we did our dig. The main stratigraphic excavation was in Area S, which is located on the eastern part of the uncultivated land that is directly south and above the spring. This area was so overgrown with brush that it would have been difficult for us to begin our digging, but lucky for us, there had been a fire right before, so that cleared out a lot of the brush that we were going to look forward to. Lucky for us, it works. Okay, and this is one of my final shots. This is a shot of the Sea of Galilee. One of the many field trips that we took during this time was to Nazareth. And on our way back to the kibbutz, this was an image that I captured of the Sea of Galilee. And another field trip that we took, clearly I was interested in what was happening in front of me at Tel Megiddo, but these are the ruins, and this was one of the many field trips that we had the opportunity to participate in. Over the time that we were there, we went to the springs, we went to Nazareth, Jerusalem, and this is a shot of me overlooking Megiddo. Thank you.
I'm Susanna Morris. I'm a second-year MTS student, and I'm going to talk to you about a day in the life of a digger. Our days as diggers began when we woke up in our rooms at the kibbutz, which we shared with 3 or 4 other novice archaeologists. But when we woke up, the kibbutz didn't look anything like that and looked more like this. Our alarms went off at 4:30 a.m., which I consider to be nighttime. Still moaning about yesterday's bruises and sore joints, we rolled out of bed and threw our gear into our backpacks. On the way out the door, we'd scarf down maybe a chocolate-covered granola bar, breakfast number 1. There are more to come. At this point in the day, chilly and tired, I seriously questioned my sanity in coming out to dig. We left for the site at 5 a.m. By the time we sat up and started digging, the sun was just rising. We often saw hot air balloons taking off right beside our site, and you can see them right there in the photo. Slowly during this time, I would emerge from my stupor and remember why Jezreel was an incredible place to spend the summer. What you see here is one of the most anticipated moments of the day. This was 8:15 at our second breakfast time. We were so much like hobbits on that dig. At breakfast, I would scarf down 2 sandwiches, 2 hard-boiled eggs, a bell pepper, served whole, as they do in Israel, a tomato, also served whole, and maybe a pear. I have no shame. The day would get hotter and hotter, and our water breaks would get more and more frequent. I found myself lapsing into fantasies about lunch, 15 minutes after second breakfast ended. But in the midst of all this, we found ourselves developing strength we didn't have before. The team dubbed my friend Kayla and me Little Girl Big Rock, and in this picture, we're showing off our big muscles and new skills. Sometimes towards the afternoon, we felt a bit discouraged. As in this picture, the rocks we hoped were a wall just turned out to be a random pile. Or the only pottery we found were the dreaded Byzantine fragments from a later period than we hoped to be uncovering. But the exciting moments of discovery, like in this picture of me in this slide, and of Yolanda in the next one, made all the long hours of digging worth it. Sorry, Yolanda. After we packed up and left the site around 12:30 every day, these were the moments that we bragged about over lunch in the kibbutz dining room and to our roommates at night. During our afternoon pottery reading sessions and lectures, we had the opportunity to talk about our finds with the archaeologists. At the end of the day, it was our community of diggers that made all the work worth it. Above and beyond learning about archaeology and the Bible and ancient Israel, at Jezreel, I learned how to be a teammate. I learned that the best way to relieve my own tiredness was to lug an exhausted teammate's bucket for them. The hard work we did together during the day quickly bonded us, and after hours, we continued building those friendships during long walks, deep conversations, and even a shared pint in the kibbutz pub.
Good morning. So the excavation of an archaeological site is not as much like Indiana Jones as many of us would hope. It's a combination of constant effort and meticulous process. Because the excavation process essentially destroys the archaeological site, careful steps have to be taken to preserve as much information as possible before the site is destroyed. For example, the first season of the Jezreel dig was entirely surveying the area and, like Rhonda said, using LiDAR to find and pinpoint the most promising areas. It was only the second season, which we were involved in this past summer, where ground was first broken. Before ground could even be broken, measurements had to be made, and each square would be divided into a grid, or the site would be divided into a grid made up of 6 by 6 squares, seen here. Each square would be assigned and excavated by a group of 3 or 4 students, And sandbags were placed around the borders of each square to help keep debris and dirt from falling into the area and to keep the area from spreading out, which they tended to do. The goal of the excavation was not to get as deep as possible, but rather to try and find an accurate history of the chronology of the area. And so we don't just go into a square and begin digging straight down. Instead, we had the exciting job of scraping off layers of dirt, 6 to 10 centimeters at a time. For some squares, the dirt was especially rocky and just had to be pickaxed through entire layers. All dirt and rocks had to be removed by bucket and taken away to a separate site and dumped so that dirt from different layers would not contaminate other squares or get back into the square. The purpose of all of this was so that the record keepers could then have an accurate account of where artifacts were found in squares and what time period, hopefully, they came from. For area S, the squares were fairly straightforward. For areas M, they started with above-ground sites, or part of the site was initially above ground. For example, pieces of the bedrock were already poking through, and most of the digging or excavation involved just cleaning away parts of the area. This was one of the most impressive finds, an Iron Age wine press, and it was found on the hillside and was actually quite distinct, and just a lot of the excavation for this particular site involved simply cleaning out. I say simply, it was not simple, it took full weeks. Cleaning out the areas in certain deeper parts, for example, the treading floor and the huge, I can't express how deep this was, but this vat was deeper than I am tall. And just cleaning that out, again, layer by layer to preserve the chronology of the sediment. And I then had the privilege of unearthing this particular wall in area S, where when we get down to a particular level and you know you found something, it then involves the exciting job of slowly scraping away and dusting pieces of dirt off of what you found. So these particular, they look like troughs, are actually frequently found all over the site. We did not excavate many of them, but are just above ground. Some of them are thought to be sarcophagi. Some of them were probably multi-purpose and used first as sarcophagi and then perhaps as troughs for horses. At the end of the day, Susanna mentioned pottery reading, and that would be when we would gather together and find and try to date any artifacts we had found. That involved basically dumping out the boxes one at a time and going through piece by piece to try and see if we could identify what time period each piece of pottery or each piece of flint could be from and what that could tell us about the history of the square it was found in. Thank you.
Good morning. So my name is Yolanda Norton. I am a third-year PhD student in the Graduate Department of Religion in Hebrew Bible. And so before I talk a little bit about the significance for biblical studies, I have to say, now while I don't think that I was the least enthusiastic person on the trip, I definitely was the least enthusiastic about going on the trip. And so thus was the last person to sign up. And the spiel that you guys all got from Dr. Knight at the beginning was the spiel that he had to give to pretty much all the doctoral students over and over again and over again until one of us acquiesced and I drew the short straw. So, you know, I kept thinking all along the way, sure, this is more informative than books and computers, but I will easily take my books and computers. No one wants to go on this trip. So, but that's fine. I went, and it really was a great transformative experience and probably one of the best educational experiences that I had. And while I dug up those squares of rocks and dirt, and my first square got closed because there was nothing in it. I had to continue to remind myself that I love my Hebrew Bible faculty. I do. I swear that I love my Hebrew Bible faculty, because sometimes that's not how it felt. But, did we do this? Did I do this wrong? So, why is any of this important? The question of biblical significance has two parts. The first part that you really have to attend to in thinking about the question of archaeology is, why do biblicists care about archaeology to begin with? So we answer the first part of that question I do, with the words of David Hopkins, who himself is a Vanderbilt alum and does a lot of work in archaeology. David Hopkins says that archaeology can neither confirm nor deny biblical history. So what? Why do we care? We care because even if archaeology can't reveal or corroborate the biblical story, we do this work because it gives us some insight into the social world that likely provided a backdrop for the biblical text. Artifacts teach us about the way that people carried out domestic tasks. They teach us about the tools of battle and and they allow us to hypothesize about the religious practices of the day. So when we look at something like this, we were in the Jezreel Valley, and it takes us back to understanding things like the way of the sea, the relationship between Jezreel and Megiddo. And so when you were looking at, for example, Area M, you were high enough that you kind of looked out and you could see the way of the sea here, right? So it doesn't confirm anything about what we read in 1st and 2nd Kings as necessarily true, but you can imagine the possibilities geographically and topographically of what was happening in these stories as you're doing the work. So when we talk about all of this, as I said, there's some strong architectural parallels between what we found in room M1 at Jezreel and the famous palace of Ahab and Jezreel at Samaria in 1st and 2nd Kings. That room included internal cisterns, caves, and offered that kind of magnificent view. And so you see that, like, as it stood, so too could Jezreel. The stories were possible, right? And what made it even more possible was that a lot of the things that we were finding in these areas were dated back to around the Iron Age, which is the kind of the time period that we're thinking about in that area. So I'm going to skip around. When we talk about what we found at Jezreel, the pottery shards, the different artifacts, and we connect that with this, which is what we call the Assyrian Black Obelisk, or the Jehu Stela, which is also a part of our 1st and 2nd Kings narratives. In this, what you see, this kind of tells the story of Shalmaneser III, who continued his policy of expansion started by his father, and he was a king, and he was this kind of monolith found at Kirk on the Tigris, has a rhetorical language and records the events of several campaigns, including an expedition against a formidable coalition of 12 kings, right? So to this coalition was contributed kind of thousands of chariots and foot soldiers from Ahab, the Jezreelite. And so in 841, Jehu, the successor of Ahab, broke his alliance with Phoenicia and Judah and submitted to Assyria, and that's what's depicted here. And so while this was not found at Jezreel, it all contributes to this kind of Iron Age conceptualization of what's possible in the biblical text. So if you're thinking about Ahab and Jezebel, and what you often think about is what? The winepress, the vineyard, the story from 1 Kings 21. And so as we're finding, these are kind of initial pictures. This is actually a good picture because this is what this winepress area that Caitlin showed you looked like when I left. So this, they did a lot of work in the intermediate time. But so to look at the top of the site and see the Way of the Sea, to come down to find this winepress, to find all this Iron Age 2 material, connects you to these stories even more, because from the wine press while you're standing, you can see the top of the hill and see area in, right? So again, all of these things kind of pull us back into the world of these stories and remind us of what was happening in 1st and 2nd Kings, among other places. And so nobody would be willing to say that vineyard or that wine press that we found was Naboth's vineyard, right? But what it says is that these stories were not completely impossible. They give us, they allow us the opportunity to do some scholarly imagining about what would have been happening day to day for people, and that these stories were pulled out of some real life experience for people during that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, wouldn't you have liked to have been in the field with them? Next year, you can do it again. It is exciting to do something of this type. It's I mean, you don't know what the next spade is going to turn up. I remember one place where I dug, there was this one person who had been digging in the whole season and not really found anything at all, and decided to take a day off. And then the day that this guy took off, this was at Kfarnachum, the guy where somebody stepped on in there, picked up a stone, and underneath it was found a cache of, I don't know, 20 or 30 gold coins. The biggest collection of gold coins ever found in Israel, and it's in the museum now. How would you like to feel? How would you feel about that person if you were that person? Anyway, we've got, like I said, you're welcome to have a look at these items here to see some of what can be picked up. You'll notice handles for jars, or a bowl or something like this, the bottom of the bowl. This is probably a weight for a loom. This is not a pottery piece. I believe it's a piece of salt from the Dead Sea. For me. Anyhow, just have a look at some of those if you want. But we've got time now for questions, and please, not to me as much as to the others here that we're talking. Yeah.
Speaking of coins, were you able to date any pottery that you found by finding coins in the same
Coins don't come until later. Well, sorry, go ahead.
Right, we were digging in areas that were much earlier than coins. So we did turn off some coins from the British Mandate period. So our early coins, those were the only coins we found this summer. But the pottery of Palestine is really well understood in terms of the chronology. So I mean, as you can see in that picture that someone showed, we have books that we can refer to that show us exactly to what period the pottery shows belong. So we were able to date then the areas, especially the one where these four work, the stratigraphic area called the rocks, very, very clearly to the early Bronze Age.
Pottery is one of the key ways of trying to date materials. As you can imagine, a person doesn't kind of just step up and make a pot. I mean, there's a long tradition of technology that goes behind it. At one point, they're making them without a wheel. Then somebody comes up with the idea of throwing a pot on a wheel, and then the pottery gets to be smoother, and still it's very thick. And then finally, at a later period, they've learned how to do it so that they can make very thin. Like this, very thin pottery. This is from the Roman period. So this is a technique that is evolved over time, and once you've learned this structure, this chronology of it, and you pick up a piece like they were doing there at the pottery reading, and you can identify it fairly confidently in terms of at least relative dating. This one here is earlier than the other. You don't necessarily know exactly what actual date it was. Now, any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry about that. Why would the digging have stopped? After 6 years, all of a sudden they quit digging there and then they pick it back up. But why the break? Is that
I want Jenny probably to answer this, but let me just tell you, digs are not normally endless processes. They normally would set a specific goal, and it would be, and Megiddo probably has been dug on, and Jerusalem have been dug on for long periods of time. But even with Megiddo, there was a multi-year stretch there where they laid off. Part of the problem is publication. Archaeologists love to dig; they don't like to publish. And so that's one thing that the Megiddo has done, is they've decided to dig only every other year, so that then in between they would be processing the material and publishing it. Jenny, you want to say anything more about that, specifically Jezebel?
Those are very good. I mean, also the director of Jezebel was one of the directors was Dr. Sishkin, who was the director of Megiddo as well until this past year. So my understanding is that there was an opportunity to start a new project with Megiddo that sort of ended up taking him away from Jezebel. So that's one reason. But then all these other reasons also played a part. And that there was a fixed number of years, I think, that they planned to be in the field before they published. So it had kind of run its course also.
Yeah, question back there.
Yeah, I wonder, you said this is the second year that you started this. What are some long-term goals, you may have in this project? What do you hope to find or anticipate finding?
Our primary goal, we started in 2012 with the surveys that you heard about. We really wanted to get a sense of the occupation of a very large area, 2.5 square kilometers. So the site, you saw in some of those photos in the aerials, is huge. I mean, there's a tell where the Iron Age settlement was, but then there's a vast area below it that we knew had occupation. Because you walk the surface and it's littered with stuff. But no one had really looked carefully. You also see Roman tombs on the landscape, dozens of them, all over the place, caves, etc. So we did the initial survey in order to get a sense of the extent of the settlement. So one of our major questions is basically to learn more about that. It's like, in what period was the site inhabited, which parts of the site were inhabited at different times. We've been focusing on this area just through the spring, which has never been examined before. So, I mean, we found immediately under the surface early Bronze Age remains, which is very interesting. Why weren't they settled there later? Why is there Iron Age and Roman occupation? So we're trying to get a sense of the connection between the spring and the tell, and then kind of get an idea of the settlement pattern of the entire site. So those are the big questions. The winery, the fact that we found this winery, we found it last year when we surveyed in 2012, could be big news. I mean, it's not completely excavated yet, but a visiting expert, thinks it's probably the biggest Iron Age winery in Israel, which could be terrific for us. So we're going to continue to explore that in years to come. There are some other exposed olive presses in some areas and quarries and other things that we'll be examining. There's also standing Crusader architecture on the site. There's a tower. There's a Byzantine church that was reused later. There's a cemetery from the Crusader period. So the site was occupied perhaps for 7,000 years, we think. So we just want to get a better idea of the settlement history of it since the beginning, from the Neolithic up to the current.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What did you all mention something about letting other people come here? I'm sure there's a tension between the academic exploration and letting tourists or other people come here. So at what point do you decide that you have kind of exhausted what you can, and I imagine there's damage to be done when you let go to a larger company. How do you strike that balance?
For this particular site, I think the archaeological work that was done in the 90s was more damaging than anything. I mean, when you go, actually, when you went to the tell, right? I mean, actually, up on the tell when we did the tour at the end. The pits that remain from the squares have totally crumbled in. I mean, so much so that it's dangerous to walk there, which is why it's barbed wire. So one of the things we think is important in terms of the, trying to heritage preservation kind of aspect of this is to try to clean up the site and make it actually safe enough for people to visit. So there really is one of our goals. scientific interest, we have the educational interest in running a field school for students to learn about, how to do archaeology. But also, I mean, we think the people on the kibbutz where we stay are very invested in the site and are really happy to have this attention kind of brought to it. So I think there's a lot of improvement that can be made there before that becomes a big concern. I mean, that's a really good question. In an area that's popular, I mean, like Jerusalem, I mean, is a great example, right? Because, I mean, there's archaeological work being done in Jerusalem, but it's literally in people's backyards. There are a lot of issues. Jezebel, I mean, there's nothing, no one's using the site anymore, really, except for picnics and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential to do something very interesting there, actually. That can, help educate the public about the site, the history of the site, the biblical period, but also everything before and after. And so these are plans that we're hoping to develop over the next year or two. Think of the strategy. But we see this as a great opportunity because you don't find that many biblical sites, tell sites in Israel that are sort of abandoned like this, honestly. So I think this presents a great chance to do a lot and do something new, with this.
And you could be involved in it. All right, we are pledged to leave to stop by 8:30. Is there one final question? You could talk with any of the students or with Jenny afterwards. Any other question? Been great to have you here this morning. I was glad that we were able to recruit our students. As you can see, classes are beginning, and one of them had to leave already. But this is the kind of experience that we certainly encourage, and I'm glad we could share it with you. Thank you.